Elizabeth Cady Stanton was an abolitionist and women's rights activist from New York. She was born in 1815 to an upper-class slaveholding family. Unlike most women at her time, she had the opportunity to receive a formal education at the Troy Female Seminary. Her father was a prominent lawyer in the community, and through observing intellectual conversations between him and his colleagues, she gained an informal legal education. Her knowledge of the legal system gave her an advantage when fighting for women's suffrage. Later on, she got married to an abolitionist and had 2 daughters, who both received a college education.
Stanton started out as an influential abolitionist. She was very involved in the American Equal Rights Association, and she attended the Anti-Slavery Convention with her husband. It was there that she met Lucretia Mott. Both women were understandably angry about the exclusion of women from the convention and vowed to work together to improve women's rights. After this experience, Stanton hosted the first ever women's rights convention, the Seneca Falls Convention, in her house. At the convention, Mott and Stanton led a discussion on the social, religious, and civil rights of women. The attendees also debated a document which Stanton authored, the Declaration of Sentiments. The Declaration of Sentiments was a proposal to change the Declaration of Independence so that it would read, "All men and women are created equal." This was her ideal for American society and her standards of gender equality for the country.
After the Declaration, she continued to fight for women's rights by advocating for the New York Married Women's Property Act, which protected the right of women to own property once they were married. And it was passed. After the act was passed, Stanton focused her efforts on women's suffrage. While fighting for women's suffrage, Stanton met Susan B. Anthony. Together, they collaborated and made great progress for women's rights. Because Stanton had 7 children that she needed to care for, she would write speeches and Anthony would orate them to the public.
However, there was an emerging conflict of interest in the American Equal Rights Association. Many of her fellow abolitionists refused to include the issue of women's suffrage in the 15th Amendment, stating that black male suffrage was more important. She stated, "The prolonged slavery of women is the darkest page in human history." Together, Stanton and Anthony founded the National Women's Suffrage Association to focus solely on the issue of women's suffrage. It was this organization that played the most important role in passing the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote in 1920. At the age of 65, she co-authored 3 volumes of The History of Women's Suffrage with Anthony and Matilda Joslyn Gage. These books recorded the women's rights activism of the time and were the foundation for the movement that eventually granted women the right to vote. Stanton also published The Woman's Bible, where she proposed the idea that man dominated Orthodox religion and how that theology was the basis for the mistreatment of women.
Elizabeth Cady Stanton believed in equality and suffrage for everyone. She fought for what she believed in, regardless the strength of the opposition, and succeeded in laying the foundation of the fight for women's suffrage. Some of her ideals were identical to those of the Jacksonian democracy, specifically her goal of suffrage for everyone. Even though Jackson never fought for the suffrage of women or African Americans, he was a big believer in the destruction of aristocracy and social hierarchy. The age of Jackson was characterized by the expansion of suffrage to the common man. In this way, Stanton's efforts led to greater democracy in America, similar to Jacksonian principles.